Thank you, Jasmine.
Hi, Nayiri. I'm Ishani, and I'm a member of DLife.in, India's first and only award-winning low-carb platform. And I, along with my co-host, Dr. Jasmeet Kaur, we welcome you for this session on low-carb and type 1 diabetes. So, as a
Thank
type 1 diabetes myself, I'm super excited, and I'm a big fan of your podcast. So, we are very excited to welcome you.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so D-Life was founded in 2014 by Anup Singh, a silver medalist from IIT Roorkee and the recipient of Icons of India Award. Anup is the pioneer of the low carb movement in India with his path breaking protocol of maximum 100 gram carbs per day given by him in 2012 that made lchf possible for Indians and especially for Indian vegetarians. In 2021, D-Life launched its Diploma course, which is the only course approved under NSDC Partner, the Government of India. So it's legally tenable in India. In this segment, and the only course with the global biggest 144 hours CPD So hours credit. So Anup Singh, along with Shashikant Iyengar, are organizers of this metabolic health conference. So yes, we welcome you, Nayiri. And a little about you. I hope we are pronouncing your name right.
You said it
So,
beautifully. Thank you.
yeah. So Nayiri Mississian is a pioneering metabolic health expert, low carb advocate, and podcaster who has transformed the understanding of diabetes management through her personal and professional journey. As a type 1 diabetic with over 47 years of experience, she has become a leading voice in the low carbohydrate nutrition movement, challenging traditional medical approaches to metabolic health. Her work centers on demonstrating how a low carb diet can dramatically improve blood sugar control and reduce insulin dependency. Through her coaching, online platforms, and personal testimony, Nayiri has helped countless individuals with diabetes and metabolic disorders reimagine their approach to nutrition and health. So, to start, Nayiri, you've been living with type 1 diabetes since 1978, which is a very, very long time. And I can see that you are thriving, living with type 1 diabetes. So, how did the medical advice you initially received differs from the medical current approach, your current approach to managing diabetes?
It was a long, long, long time ago. So 47 years. 47 years ago it was. So, these days when people say low carbohydrate diet, a lot of people have that reluctance and, oh, what is this? This is fad. And, oh, it doesn't work. Oh, no, we need carbohydrates. Guess what? When I was diagnosed in 1978, my mother was given a sheet of paper by the doctor who diagnosed me because I had to stay at the hospital for a few days. That sheet of paper had a food list on it. It wasn't just for type 1 diabetics. It was for all diabetics, including type 2. So if you are diabetic, you had to follow, there was a green list, orange list, and red list. The red list was sugars, pastries, and cakes, and some of the sweet fruits. And on the orange list, we had all the legumes like lentils, chickpeas, etc., which I could eat, but not, huge quantities. And on the green list, there was all the salad, vegetables, and many other vegetables. In fact, a lot of vegetables other than the starchy potatoes, and meats and fish and dairy and cheese, all of those. So it wasn't controversial. So I don't know why suddenly now people are like, oh, it's controversial. It doesn't work. That was the diet that was recommended to all diabetics. In fact, I grew up with my extended family. My grandparents from both sides of the family were type 2 diabetics. Not type 1. I'm the only type 1 in my family, but type 2 diabetics. And guess what? They were following the same diet that I was recommended to follow. So my whole extended family with my uncles, my aunties, they were married at the time. So it was a busy household, big family sort of surrounding. Everyone was eating the same foods. everyone was eating low or lowish carbohydrate food. There was no controversy around it. In fact, never, not even once, did I feel like I was deprived of something. We didn't have sugary drinks. We didn't have Coca-Cola at home. We didn't have cakes. Cakes were an occasional treat. From birthday to birthday, my mom would treat me to cake, and I remember every single cake for every birthday that she made. She made for me. So that's how it was. So and I think it is because of my upbringing on a healthy home cooked diet that I didn't suffer, that I even now, I don't, after 47 years of type 1 diabetes, I don't have any complications. I'm in perfect health. But things did change when I came to the UK. So I grew up in the Middle East, and in my early 20s, I came to the UK to continue my studies. And as a good young person, I had to go to the local diabetes clinic to register because I needed to have prescription for insulin, etc. So that was the first time in my 20s that I read on the wall, large posters on the wall at my diabetes clinic, messages like, there is no such thing as a diabetes diet. Diabetics can eat everything and take insulin. We have powerful, effective insulins now. And that part was true because when I was growing up, we didn't have rapid acting insulin. But by the time I'd come to the UK, 25 years later, we had Novolog or Novorapid in the UK, Humalog. So we had those rapid acting insulins. And so then the advice was, we have effective insulin, eat your carbohydrates, well, eat your sugars and starches, and just cover it with insulin. I tried that. I will. In fact, I thought, oh, we were in the Middle East, must have been some kind of backwards, right? I remember actually making an international call. This was pre-internet, right? It cost me a fortune that I could barely afford, but I called my mother to say, it's so advanced here. Medical care is so advanced. You will not believe. They're not telling me not to eat. They're telling me to eat anything I want. And that was, I think, the first time I actually probably took a few sips of Coca-Cola or Pepsi. I'd never drunk it. I'd never craved it. Because it wasn't part of my upbringing. I drank it and I didn't like it. So I decided it's not for me. But the fact that I could eat anything and cover it with insulin was completely new to me. I tried it. That's how I lived for 10 years. In fact, throughout my pregnancy also, I followed carb-based diet. And the fact that I'd also, just around that time, before coming to the UK, I decided to become a vegetarian. So I was no longer eating meat, to my mother's dismay, but I was no longer eating chicken or fish. So as a vegetarian, of course, now, and with the message that I could eat anything I wanted, now my diet was much, much higher in carbohydrates than it ever had been. I struggled with blood sugar control. I attended 2 courses over, I think, 10, 15 years, offered by the diabetes clinic to teach me how to count carbohydrates. We didn't have those apps. Now there's tons of apps. You can just you can even post a photo of your meal to an app and it works out how all the macronutrients. We didn't have those. We had to attend actual physical courses. I became a master. In fact, I volunteered as well at the hospital to teach newly diagnosed diabetics how to count their carbohydrates. Despite my mastery in carbohydrate counting, I still couldn't match my insulin to the carbs I was eating. There was something wrong. There was something wrong. It wasn't working. But because it's put forward to us as an absolute non-negotiable science, I didn't question the method. I started questioning myself, whether I was making a mistake, whether it was 15 grams of carbohydrate instead of the 13 that I'd calculated. I kept blaming myself. For many years, I looked at myself as a failure, because despite my carbohydrate counting skills, the skills of matching or trying to match my insulin to the carbohydrates, my A1C at one point actually was 12.8. That was the highest it had ever been, 12.8. I brought it down during my pregnancy, but again, it was 6.8. So,
but what was the HbA1c level you maintained before coming to UK?
So my mother says it was always below 7, so something like 6.8 or 7, and they were happy with it because we didn't have rapid insulins. I rarely ever experienced hypos. The insulin we had at the time was kind of more, I think I even initially used bovine insulin. So they were safer. They didn't cause hypos because, of course, they weren't rapid-acting insulins.
Yeah.
They were more intermediary, and I had to take 3 set doses of shots, and then I had to eat at certain times similar portions of food. And I don't remember many hypoglycemic episodes. There would be 1 or 2 because I was a very physically active child, but they were rare.
So I can get that you were lucky in a way that, you grew up with healthy food already. So you were not. So when the opposite case in India is that, the diet chart that type 1 diabetics get is usually like the American Diabetes Association chart, loaded with carbs. You just take insulin, and there's just portion control, but the foods are all the same. So in that way, you were very, lucky in that way that you grew up with healthy food. So, Nayiri, how has the medical community, you think, responded to alternative approaches like low-carb diets and intermittent fasting for type 1 diabetes management?
So the medical community in general, if we look at sort of globally, I think there is a lot more understanding of lower carbohydrate diets now as an intervention to control blood sugars. I mean, in the realm of diabetes, for example, especially with type 2 diabetes, it's an accepted method, and if your doctor doesn't support you, they are completely ignorant. I mean, the knowledge should be updated. With type 1, we've got a long way to go. However, the recent position statement, position paper from the US-based Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, of course, is going to make a difference. Podcasts like mine and many other type 1s who are following Bernstein, for example. My platform isn't a Bernstein platform, but of course, we are all type 1s who are able to control that. We're all Bernstein's children. That's how I look at us. We're Bernstein students. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing this. So in the type 1 space, we still got a long way to go. Personally, my diabetes consultant or endocrinologist, as we call, as some other countries call them, doesn't understand what I do. And he asked me a few questions in my last visit and the visit before. So how are you dosing why are you taking your 4 units of insulin? I said, well, for the protein. And he didn't argue because that was new to him. But he said, okay, so how are you working out? How much protein to take? I said, well, I figured it out through trial and error, because that's what it comes down to. You have to take notes. Even Dr. Bernstein recommends that. He just gives a starting point, but you have to write down what you ate, test it, how much insulin you took, at what point did you take that insulin. So now I've got it all figured out. It took me a whole year actually to figure it out. And but at least he's not dismissing my efforts. He's not questioning why I'm doing it. He's not telling me not to do it. So I'm happy. He doesn't generally interfere with what I'm doing. He just writes my prescriptions and leaves the diet to me. So I think that's big. That's big.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
because,
acceptance.
the major hurdle, the people face while following this low carb is all the misconceptions that the people have, like it hinders the growth and development of the child with the type 1 diabetes. So that is the only concern which we see, that people, when they come to us and we suggest them this low carbohydrate approach, and they do get the flat lines, like HbA1c of around 5, and sometimes even we see up to 5.5, 5.6. At least they are better, like, because before they come to us, they are on 12%, 11%, and something like that. And even if they're getting these flat lines, and they are, when they have they're meeting with the conventional doctors, they ask them to add certain number of carbohydrates to each meal, even if they're getting the flat lines.
Yeah, that's sad. I think we need to. I was listening to Marty Kendall earlier on talking about the importance of protein. I think we underestimate protein. I mean, most people, look, in my culture as well, I grew up in the Middle East, and most people around me, everyone kind of understands fat, right? Because we've been told, oh, fat, foods that contain fat, everyone knows that, right? People don't understand protein as much. They underestimate. So children who are reducing their carbohydrate intake need higher amounts of protein to meet their optimal growth. Again, Dr. Bernstein mentions that in the book. Children need large amounts of protein, sometimes even more than what their adult parents would be eating, to help them grow. And to be honest, I mean, the same could apply to us adults too. I focus on animal proteins as the main component of my foods. And it helps me repair my cells. It helps me maintain my muscle mass, because we know science shows us that muscle is your longevity organ. I think someone put it that way, and it's been stuck in my head. Longevity organ, that's your muscle. And longevity doesn't necessarily mean living longer and sicker, but living a healthy life. It's important. So this is why I'm no longer a vegetarian. In fact, 5 years now. So I'm 5 years into meat eating, and that has helped me tremendously to maintain more normal blood sugars.
So, Nayiri, as you grew up in the Middle East, there are the type 2 diabetes especially is really skyrocketing in Middle East. So what do you think, what are the key factors contributing to it?
I know Shashi was very looking forward to me discussing this point. So I'm glad you asked it. We're competing with India. Middle East is competing with India. It's one or the other, right on the top, and and it's a disaster. It's a disaster. Okay, the first culprit is definitely that we have incorporated Western foods, processed foods. So I'm pretty sure you will identify with that, because I have many Indian friends and they say, yes, this is how people think in India too. So you look at younger families, right? Feeding boxed cereals and that sort of junk to their children, completely oblivious of the impact of that on their children's health. But they are actually feeling like they are progressive. They're modern. They're like American, because this idea of American or Western food as being progressive and modern and, easy and convenient. And so this is how people see it. They think they're doing something good by saying goodbye to their traditional foods and incorporating or adopting a more Western junk food diet. There's one element. That's one element. But also, if you look at our traditional foods, for example, all these beautiful desserts and sweet, sugary foods that are typical of, Middle Eastern cuisine, whereas 100 years ago, they would have made an appearance on days of festive days. For example, for the Middle East, you have multiple cultures and similar to India and religions. For example, for the Muslims, during Ramadan, they would have fasted and then feasted on all these sweet foods. But that would be it. You wouldn't see those sweet desserts because they were typical to Ramadan period. Same for the sweet breads and some of those brioches that, that people eat, the Christian people, they would have made an appearance around Easter. Now you can just walk across the road to the pastry shop and buy these sweets any day of the week you want. And so food is, in fact, unhealthy foods are easy to access. And we're physically putting less effort into making food. We have all sorts of kitchen gadgets and, we're not starting from scratch making the dough. And I made that. I did that, actually. Used to make bread at home. It's a lot of effort. The big loaf of bread, that would take like probably 4 hours. That's a lot of effort for my little hands. I used to bring my daughter in to help me knead it, etc. We're not putting as much effort. We have machines for everything these days, right? And so easy access to junk foods, easy access to food in general, and less effort making and preparing that food. So yeah, all of that equals disaster, health disaster.
So, Nayiri,
Yeah,
you mentioned that you cover your protein with the bolus. But what about the fat? Do you consider the fat is inert? We don't have to cover it with the insulin dosages, because what I have seen is when we give people like the kids some extra calories, even if they're coming from the fat, we have to cover with, could be extra basal dose, or even sometimes some regular insulin as well. So what are your thoughts on this?
I always say that if you have type 1 diabetes, there are no free foods for you. You can drink water and not dose for it, but anything else will require dosing. I can't think of anything. I mean, I might just get away with half a boiled egg, for example. But that's not a meal, right? So whatever you're eating, every single macronutrient in there needs insulin. Now, how you take that insulin is going to be based on context. Are you using a pump? Do you have access to regular insulin, for example, intermediate acting insulin? Are you only using rapid insulin for your macronutrients? So it depends, but there are strategies to employ. But it is a fact. It is a fact. You need insulin for all your macronutrients. What I do personally, now I'm wearing a pump, insulin pump. So for the carbohydrates in my meal, and it would be carbohydrates from, I don't know, broccoli, and so small amounts of carbohydrates from broccoli or salad vegetables or whatever. I will take my rapid-acting insulin right up front. For the protein component, I give myself microdoses, depending on the protein type, over a period of 4 hours, sometimes over a period of 6 hours. So after steak, for example, that's a very slow digesting food. And so the impact of the stake on your blood sugars isn't going to appear instantly. Usually with me, I mean, it varies from, just to make it more mystifying, type 1 diabetes is so individual. So I would need insulin over a period of 6 hours. I cannot take my, say, 5 units of insulin to cover it all in one shot, because I'm going to crash. Remember, my pump has rapid acting insulin, NovaRapid. So instead, I divide the 5 units up into smaller portions, 0.8 units, maybe right at the beginning, an hour later, maybe 1 unit, and 2 hours later, when I see the blood sugar rising a little bit, another two units. And that's how I cover the protein. Now, the fat, I work it into my basal insulin. So my long-acting takes care of the fat. But on days that we are not eating as much fat, I have to lower my basal insulin. But it works for me because fat has that stubborn rise impact. It kind of raises your blood sugar, say from, I don't know, 80 to 200, and it just stays there. It just keeps it there for a good, 18 hours, right? And people go, oh, I'm insulin resistant. I question that, because it's not necessarily insulin resistance for me. It's not that the fat made you insulin resistant. It's probably that you did not cover the fat, because fat needs insulin, maybe trickles of insulin over a period of 12 to 18 hours. If you cover that, you'll find that, well, I'm not insulin resistant. No, I'm eating the fat, but I'm covering it. And so, I'm not having the same impact. So I always question that. I may be wrong. It may actually be insulin resistance, but as any macronutrient, it needs covering. You're going to need extra insulin for it.
It's basically that extra energy has to be stored somewhere, and you need that insulin for that, no?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, this is a very, I think, important question for me to ask you, because this is often ignored, this side, that what are the most significant, you think, mental and emotional struggles that you've observed among type 1 diabetics over your, whole span of being one? If you have faced personal struggles or you've seen people around you.
Okay, I think we don't generally talk about the struggles. We talk about our successes, right? You look at some Facebook groups where people boast how beautifully they're managing their blood sugars, following certain protocols. They're only posting their graphs when they are beautiful. They're not really posting about their struggles. I think the more we talk about the struggles and the frustration, and the less judgmental we are of each other, I think the better our community will be. So I try to provide that platform in my private group on Facebook. I say this is a no judgment group. We're all somewhere on our health journey. It's a spectrum. We're somewhere along that line, and different interventions, different ways of taking your insulin, different insulins will work for different people. Even different ratio of macronutrients. You cannot say, if you have type 1 diabetes, this is what you should eat, this is how much insulin you need to take. It varies from person to person. Heck, it even varies in the same person from day to day, especially if you're female. Because we have a lot more hormonal fluctuations than males do, right? So frustration is what I see. And it's understandable, because you're going to have to manage it on an hourly basis. You cannot. For example, now I'm watching where my blood sugars are going. They're rising a little bit because I'm anxious and
excited.
adrenaline because of the adrenaline, right? So, but I'm going to leave that because right after this interview, it's going to go back right down to normal. So, but you have to be aware of where your blood sugars are. You cannot take your eyes off it. You cannot pretend you don't have type 1 diabetes one day because you're too tired of it. And I also want to say, I don't want people to kind of have a wrong interpretation of a low carbohydrate diet. Low carbohydrate diet still needs management. You still need insulin. You still need to take the right amount of insulin. You still need to manage your blood sugars. So nothing out there can give you that peace of mind. So you can sit back and say, got it all cracked out. And I don't need to do much. Today, I'm just going to put my feet up and just relax. It doesn't work. Blood sugars don't just stay in range because, they want to behave on that day. It doesn't work like that. You have, I call it a balancing act. To maintain normal blood sugars, you're balancing your glucose with insulin. It's a constant balancing act. So if you took too much...
And there's so many variables, no?
There are too many variables. There are too many variables, but taking all of those into account, you're still going to balance the lows with a bit of glucose and the highs with a bit of insulin. So it's constant balancing game, and you have to work on it all day long. So you understand how frustrating it can be when people go, oh, I cannot balance this. What's happening? Am I taking because of course there are other variables, so it can get frustrating. I think my attitude is, look, would you rather a disease that you cannot do anything about? When we used to complain about foods and things when we were children, I don't know if you can, if it resonates with you, my mom would say, there are too many hungry children around the world and you're complaining about this food, right? But it is, in a way, it's also the same analogy. Too many diseases that leave people completely hopeless and helpless. They want to survive, they want to live, they want to do whatever it takes to live, and there's nothing they can do. With type 1, the key is in your hands. Yes, it is hard work. Yes, it will be frustrating sometimes, but the control in a way is in your hands. It's a disease that you can manage. It's a disease that allows you to live your life, a fulfilling life. For example, there's nothing that I've wanted to do in life that I haven't done because of my type 1 diabetes. Maybe that can bring me to the fasting sort of element, because when I wanted to do fasting, I started posting in different fasting groups, looking for type 1 diabetics who were doing fasting. I thought, there must be someone out there. And I was like shunned. No, type 1 diabetics should not fast. And that's why I created a group for type 1 diabetics to give them the support if they wanted to fast. And, my aim isn't to tell everyone you should be fasting, but is it possible for a type 1 diabetic to fast? In my group, I have people undergoing cancer treatments. They want to employ the fasting protocol, but they don't know how to manage. In fact, there's just one lady who's currently going through chemotherapy, and she says, my oncologist is completely on board with fasting. He's familiar with the literature, but he's telling me, look, I don't want to take responsibility. I don't know what you're going to do with your blood sugars, because, please, can you see your endo at the same time? So she came to the group and, we're working together. She knows that there is a support network for her. So, fasting is, not everyone should fast, diabetic or not, it's not for everyone. But there are people who will benefit from either extended 5-day fast. If you're going through cancer treatment, yeah, that might be a good strategy for you. If you have excess weight to lose, it might be, I'm not saying it will, might be a good strategy for you. But intermittent fasting is I usually call it any period, over four hours that you're not eating. Because we're constantly told, hey, especially if you're diabetic, you need to eat constantly. It's like, where does that come from? We're eating too much. We're actually overfed and undernourished. So instead of focusing on nutrients, we're constantly eating junk foods just because we're told we should eat. Like, no, if just eat your 3 meals a day. That's how it was when I was growing up. I had this whole kind of idea of in fact, when I came to the UK, and people are going to be shocked about this. When I came to the UK in my 20s, and my background is in linguistics, and so I came to the UK, and with my knowledge of multiple languages, I was pursuing linguistic studies. I did not know what the word snack meant. I had to look up in the dictionary in the UK. The 2 words, in fact, the other one isn't relevant to that. The other word was bullying. Like, I'd never heard of it. It just didn't exist in my culture, right? So I had to look up bullying and I had to look up the word snack because they were completely unfamiliar to me. So we didn't snack. We had 3 solid meals and we just played out in the forests, in the neighborhood all day long. So again, I mean, intermittent fasting, people hear the word fasting and they go, they're gonna be starved. It's not starving.
Especially in India, what I have heard is even doctors tell me that as a type 1 diabetic, you should not be fasting because you cannot fast. As a diabetic, you have to keep eating every 2 hours, every 4 hours, have a small snack. So, yeah, so, you are saying that it's doable. It's doable if you have the proper guidance and proper, you know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about the individualized approach in case of the type 1 diabetics.
Well, when I was told type 1 diabetics shouldn't fast, I was listening to all of Jason Funk's videos. And of course, they're not about type 1. They're all about type 2 diabetics. But I thought the same should apply to a type 1 diabetic. I went to PubMed. I started looking for literature just to see if what the dangers might be, right? And I found out 2 things. So diabetic ketoacidosis, and the other one was diabetic seizures. So starting with the seizures, of course, if you are skipping a meal, you're not going to take your insulin and sit back and think, okay, I took my insulin, but I'm not going to eat. I mean, that just sounds so silly to me and counterintuitive because I don't know any diabetics who are actually. So, and if there are, we need to teach them that they cannot take their insulin and decide I'm skipping the meal, but I've taken my breakfast insulin anyway. It just doesn't happen because now, I mean, the modern approach is actually to teach diabetics how to adjust their insulin dose based on what they're eating, right? So if you are eating nothing, you're going to adjust your insulin, your bolus or meal insulin dose to 0 because you have not eaten. So that makes sense. So as long as someone is doing that, then they should be safe. That's and put it out there. I thought, okay, if there's anyone, a single person who reads it and comes and joins my group, then at least we can compare notes. And now there are close to 1,000 people in my group. So intermittent fasting. So if you're skipping a meal, do not take your meal insulin, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. So we do not, if you're eating nutrient-dense foods and good, decent portions of it, and you're meeting all your nutrient requirements, you don't need to eat 3 times a day. 2 meals can be sufficient. In fact, for some people, one meal can be sufficient as long as they are not under eating. So intermittent fasting, again, should be individualized, and it's not for everyone. Even some of my group members, I told them, eat 3 meals, but I joined the group because of intermittent fasting. No, eat 3 meals, and you're already, even with 3 solid meals a day, you're already doing intermittent fasting of good 12 hours. So again, we have to individualize, and we have to know how to adjust our insulin doses, because that's important. So even the long-acting insulin, or if you're using a pump, your basal insulin might need reducing if you're skipping a meal or 2 meals, or if you're doing a whole day of fast. So you need to also be prepared to reduce your long-acting insulin dose. And to stay safe, you need to take your electrolytes. I mean, for type 1 diabetics, that's very, very important. I usually don't buy, in fact, I never have bought any electrolyte powders or whatever, because usually I don't like the flavors, and they're very expensive. So I usually have salt and my magnesium, which I take daily, magnesium glycinate. But those two, and real natural unrefined salt, which has the minerals, obviously contains some minerals, right? Natural minerals. I drink salted water when I'm fasting, and that's all I need. And as long as you have sufficient amount of insulin in your system, there is absolutely no risk of diabetic ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis will actually happen when you lower your insulin so much that your body cannot maintain its normal function.
Right.
That's dangerous. The aim is not to, go to zero insulin. I'm sorry. That's myth. And I write about that so often in my group. Do not fear insulin. Insulin is what's keeping you alive. Even when you're fasting, you still need your insulin.
Yeah. So yeah, great advice, Nayiri. And it's really inspiring to have people like you with really long-term diabetes who are thriving and setting good example for people who have just been diagnosed, or their family or loved ones who are just not feeling great.
Yeah, really great insights, Nayiri. I wanted to ask a few questions, but we are already near to the end.
Yeah,
so
we are already running out of time. So I would like to invite Shashikant Iyengar and Anup Singh to just come and end the session with us.
Nayiri,
Hello,
hello. Thank you for coming in this conference and putting in your view, because it's very, very important. It's going to reach a lot of people in India. And I think your experience as a type 1 diabetic on Dr. Bernstein's protocol is very, very important, that it reaches the masses. So your two hosts, one of them is also your same community type 1 diabetic, and Jasmeet, of course, she also takes care of type 1 diabetic cases. So that's what we felt, that you three will gel together very well, and the conversation will lead to some important information coming in for others. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in future events. We'll get back again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.